You're listening to the Joe and Rosa Show, proclaiming the gospel through word and through song.
Hi, and welcome to the Joe and Rosa Show. I'm Joe.
And I'm Rosa.
And with us today we have Norma Dougherty, author of the book Island Girl. How you doing, Norma?
I'm doing fabulous. Thank you very much, Rosa and Joe, for inviting me to share my book and my message of spiritual growth with you.
So, Norma, you grew up in a large family on the island known as Prince Edward Island. Tell us a little bit about what those early years growing up were like.
Okay, Rosa, yes, in case many of your listening audience do not know, Prince Edward Island is one of the maritime provinces. It's located in Atlantic Canada, and I always share with people that you go to Bangor, Maine, and take a right because it's out there in the Atlantic Ocean. But it's primarily a farming and fishing island, and I was in a large family on a farm. I had 6 sisters and 3 brothers, and we were as poor as church mice. We had no electricity, no indoor plumbing, and it was very cold in the winter months. We went to a little country school, a 2-room schoolhouse, and it was necessary for all of us to pitch in and help. We had to provide for the family, so my father used the motto, hard work before play, and my mother used another slogan that hard work builds character. So that's what our childhood life was like.
Wow, that is certainly a far cry from how many youngsters grow up today with all of the electronics and gizmos and gadgets. And you talk about the fact that your father was likely suffering from PTSD and how that affected you. Can you go into a little bit more detail about that?
Yes, indeed, Rosa. My father served in World War II, and he had seen many atrocities during the war. He actually suffered from what is identified today as re-experienced symptoms and hyperarousal symptoms. Back then, we didn't understand that, and we didn't even know about the concept PTSD. But he drank to drown his pain. And so as a young girl, I kind of sought a place to escape as a protective mechanism, and I dove into my fairy tales and nursery rhymes, and before I realized it, these had become a pseudo-reality for me. I began living in a fairy tale land in my head, thinking that I would somehow find that perfect life and that perfect happiness.
Wow. So after the death of your father, you discuss legacy, the concept of that, and it wasn't immediately apparent what the legacy was that he'd left for you, but you discover what that is. Can you talk about that some more?
I write in my book, Rosa, that we often don't recognize a person's appearance, legacy, and it may not be recognizable to us right away. For me, it actually took many years and a higher level of maturity to come to understand my father. But when I began to look at his life through the lens of his pain, then I was able to see something very significant. My dad had spent a great deal of his life searching for value and significance, and I write in the book it was in a little white church with a majestic steeple. His search for faith in the Lord eventually became my search, and therefore this was his legacy to me.
Wow, and that is the most important thing that a parent can pass down. And as you transitioning into that, becoming responsible, being the best that you could be, you're pitching in, you're helping to, along with your siblings, to bring money home. But you talk about that same period of time, there are these growing resentments, and that you actually believe that you were becoming self-absorbed. Can you tell us about that?
I think this happens to most teenagers. It's part of the teen years. You become very selfish, and you think the world revolves around you. You think that you want your own way in just about everything, and that's what happened for me. I wanted my own way. My sisters would tell you, if you could talk with them, that I was one who wanted my own way. I wanted a better way of life. And so I grew resentful to my parents, particularly my father, for making us do all these hard chores, like working on the farm to make money, babysitting. I thought that he was the responsible one to provide for the family, and yet seemed like some of the responsibility was falling on our shoulders. And one of the things that I felt during that process is that I was being self-absorbed and selfish, but at the same time, I was not following a slogan that my mother was teaching us girls. She would always say, beauty is as beauty does. Mm-hmm. And then this statement would always prick my conscience. And it was reminding me that Mother was trying to teach us that our character was more important than our outward appearance. And so as a teenager, you're trying to be pretty, you're trying to be perfect in every way, and it just wasn't following under that slogan, and I wasn't being, I was really being pricked in my conscience that I needed to change.
Wow. So then this period of time of being responsible, bringing money, pitching in to help with the family leads into your relationship with the Vaughn family. And you learned some things during that time about what can happen to children. And tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, yes, the Vaughn family, I wanted to mention first that the name is changed to protect the innocent, but also, Rose, secondly, the story is so detailed that it can't be easily understood by only hearing bits and pieces. Therefore, I would encourage your listeners to purchase my book. But however, I do want to say this. My experience convinced me that young girls are vulnerable, easily persuaded, and easily brainwashed, and that we in the adult community, we should do everything in our power to be overseers of our young girls and now even boys. I do want to mention that sex trafficking and sexual abuse is a growing multi-billion-dollar industry in America today. The average age for young girls is 12 to 13. It hits every community, and it can even be the girl next door. We must have awareness, prevention, and protection. It is so important.
You're absolutely right about that. And there are many church organizations and ministry organizations that are rising up too. As well, awareness is growing. But yes, absolutely agree with you on that, that it's very important that we be aware of that. And so this transitions into a period of time in your life where you're at home, you're watching Bob Hope on television during a rerun of the USO tour. And just tell us what happens there.
Rosa, let me set the stage a little bit. After my experience with the Vaughn family, I was overcome with guilt and shame. I had no counseling, and my parents didn't want to talk about the situation, so I was suffering in silence. And one day I realized I needed to talk to God, and I went to church. And during the church service, they were offering the Lord's Supper. It was such an amazing experience for me. I walked forward, and I gave all my pain to the Lord. He met me there, Rosa. He took me by the hand, and He gave me grace, mercy, and forgiveness. And I felt like I was free again. I was washed clean. It was so amazing. And yet, I didn't feel like God left me. He kept staying with me. And one day I was at home recovering. I was watching a rerun of the Bob Hope USO tour, and I saw Miss World for the very first time. I didn't even know that there was a Miss World. But anyway, as I watched, I had this vision and a voice. It said, "That's going to be you someday." And I thought, at the moment, I was, of course, excited, and my heart fluttered quite a bit. But then I thought, no, this vision is ridiculous, because there's simply no pathway for a poor young farm girl to stand on stage with someone like Bob Hope. So I just dismissed the vision and the voice, but I never forgot the experience. And within 2 years, God opened a pathway for me to attend the Miss Dominion of Canada pageant, and lo and behold, that pageant held the franchise to 4 international pageants, including the Miss World.
For the sake of time, you talk about in your book about all these, that you were honored by your community and your travels and your experience and all this stuff. But tell us what happened when you did find yourself on stage with Bob Hope.
It was at a time in London, England, when there was a lot of, to use the word, I can't even find the word. It's about how people were rebelling against beauty pageants. And so there was a lot of people coming on stage and throwing smoke bombs and that kind of thing in the crowd and saying that this was just a cattle show, and they were against, I guess it was the women's lib movement at the time. And so my experience with Bob Hope was certainly not what I thought it was going to be. He didn't even realize that I was on the stage, so I was quite disappointed. I don't know really what I expected, but I thought that I was maybe going to win the Miss World and go on tour with him, but none of that happened, and so I was saddened and disappointed.
And so, as it neared its end, as your time in pageantry and all the glitter and all the glitz neared its end, and you start to have many conflicts arise, and you can see it's coming to an end. How did this resolve? What did you decide to do? And then tell us about how your ministry got started.
It was an experience of fame and fortune that's hard to explain. So but then you also realize that the glitz and glamour are not real, and I could see that I was a marketing tool for everyone's benefit. It was difficult, as I said, to explain because I started asking myself questions. Who am I? Where do I belong? And what is my purpose in life? I was no longer a poor young farm girl. I didn't belong on Prince Edward Island. I didn't want to, and not that I didn't want to go back there, but I knew I could not live up to the high expectations that the people had put on me. Remember, Prince Edward Island was a very small farming and fishing community, and I had brought national and international attention to this island, so they had placed me on a big pedestal. I didn't know where to turn, and so I felt like I had to bury my experience in a box and try to live a normal life. And then one day I met a lady who was involved with Stonecroft Ministries. Now, Stonecroft Ministries is an evangelical outreach ministry for women, and it teaches you the meaning of the gospel. Through that ministry, I learned what Jesus meant when he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except by me. As you can imagine, when I was a young girl and I found my freedom in God through the communion service in church that Sunday, this time I was learning what it meant to have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. That was something that had been missing for a long, long time. And so through Stonecroft Ministries, I was learning that. I got involved in Bible studies and all that, and I just came to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ.
Wow. That is amazing. And in closing, can you tell our listeners where they can find your book, Island Girl, A Triumph of the Spirit?
Pardon me, my book is on every online store, Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and it's in several bookstores. I even have an audio book that's on Audible.com and iTunes. The book is available on Kindle and iBooks as well. So they can buy it just about anywhere.
Okay. Well, thank you, Norma Dougherty, for joining us today on the Joe and Rosa Show.
You are so welcome. Thank you for having me.
And you can find us on lifeinsidethehouseontherock.com.